This is Chancellor Zabanda with the news on Zodiak. Coming up at this hour. DPP legislators boycott deliberations in Parliament on Labour Relations Bill. Government passes it. Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 announces new measures against third wave of the pandemic effective Friday. Zodiak has exclusive access to footage showing poor living conditions for refugees at Zodiak camp. And in sports, Sulom says will follow the newly introduced COVID-19 preventive measures at match venues to only 100 people. We now give you the news in detail. In Parliament, there was drama when members of Parliament from main opposition Democratic Progressive Party DPP boycotted deliberations on the controversial Labour Relations Bill, which seeks to, among other things, gag employees not to go on an industrial action beyond 3 days in a year. Meanwhile, the government side has passed the controversial bill. Andrew Viano was at Parliament.
There was drama at Parliament when the opposition legislators walked out of parliamentary deliberations in protest against the two bills that the government brought in the House last week. These are Labour Relations Bill and the Employment Bill amendment, which among others seeks to introduce new laws that will not allow workers or employees to go on strike more than 3 days in a year. If they go beyond 3 days in a year, they will be deducted their wages. So, opposition side protested against the introduction of these laws, but because they are few in number, they could not even have a say. At every point that they had to protest using the votes, they lost about 3 times. They have lost about 3 times through the voting processes. So they just decided to walk out of the deliberations, and in their absence, members of Parliament, especially from the government side, have passed the controversial bill, Labour Relations Bill, that will not allow workers or employees to go on strike more than 3 days in a year. If they go beyond 3 days in a year, they will be deducted their wages.
Earlier, Chancellor College Academic Staff Union insisted the amendments are meant to stifle labour rights. CCSAU President Dr. Tiesere Chikapa has told a media briefing in Blantyre that the amendments will allow employers to mistreat their workers. Christopher Sandy reports from Blantyre.
Chancellor College Academic Staff Union CASU President Dr. Tiesere Chikapa says what government is doing to amend the Labour Relations Act is an assault to the Constitution. She says CASU will not allow anyone to dismantle the globally recognized right to withdraw labor, which is the only effective tool against exploitative and oppressive employers. Dr. Chikapa stressed that CASU is in vigilant solidarity with other trade unions and stakeholders to defend the rights to withdraw labor and freedom of association, peaceful and fair settlement of labor dispute.
So we are concerned that that is coming from nowhere, out of the blues. No consultations, there were no issues that were raised to say, okay, this is an issue, we need to find a remedy to the situation at hand. So we are concerned and we are trying to speak against that amendment. The policy processes or coming up with laws require that the public participate in the processes of coming up with amendments, new laws, and anything in that line. There's nothing wrong in terms of changing laws, but the due processes have to be followed.
The proposed amendment is suggesting 3 days of striking annually before the employer deducts wages of any worker on strike, which Parliamentary Legal Affairs Chairperson Peter Limba says will strike a balance between the employee and the need for the economy to progress. Reporting for Zodiak from Blantyre, this is Christopher Sande.
The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 has introduced new measures against the third wave of the pandemic in the country. Announcing the measures in Lilongwe Wednesday, Minister of Health Kumbizi Kandodo Chipunda says the measures have been introduced due to the rising cases of COVID-19 in the country. Among other measures are a curfew starting from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. and people should work from home, Public events limited to 50 people, diners and restaurants are encouraged to serve only takeaway foods, while bars should open at 2 p.m. and close at 10 p.m. The new measures are with effect from this Friday. Zodiak filed this report.
The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 has instructed the general public to adhere to all new COVID-19 measures, such as working in shifts and, where possible, hold meetings virtually, with all employees at high risk working from home. Bar owners have also been instructed to operate for 8 hours from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. or takeaways and restaurants. They should serve food from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Minister of Health Kumbise Kandodo Chiponda said capacity for all commuter vehicles have been reduced by 50%, public gatherings reduced to 50 from 100 people, and outdoor events 100 people from 250. She further said not more than 10 people should congregate in the funeral home, while vigils have now been banned and burials should take place within 48 hours of the death. In sports, the Presidential Task Force says only 100 people, including players and officials, should meet in one place with no spectators. But schools will remain open while they adhere to all COVID-19 preventive measures with quarantine facilities at each school. The new measures are effective this Friday, 9th July 2021.
Zodiak has exclusive access to footage showing poor living conditions for refugees that have been ordered to return to Zodiak refugee camp. The new arrivals are being kept in tents. A single tent is holding as many as 20 families. Besides lack of space, there is a new COVID-19 challenge at the camp after it confirmed first cases for children. Daniel Mibawa was at the camp and gives us more.
Basi tukungokala kuma mu mangika for sizingateke mwana ne abambo apita.
We have concealed the identity of this refugee woman for fear of reprisals. This woman, together with her husband and 4 kids, are now resident here at Zodiak refugee camp. They are living in a tent together with over 10 other families. Outside the camp, she lived in a 3-bedroomed house in Lilongwe's Area 23 and owned a business supplying alcohol and clothes.
The
return to the camp has disrupted life, she says.
Basi tukungokala kuma mu mangika for sizingateke mwana ne abambo apita akagone limozi. Tukumakala tose limozi muno topeseka nyumba imozi muli anthu 100. Nde muli anthu 100 mmene muziga ile ali seka 3 meters muna 2 meters mungoika pa ujeni pamene popo. Ndi ana. Zioniko za chifukwa sizingateke ujeni mwana azigona limozi ne abambo ake ngati mwana ali ndi 15 years. Ali ndi 12 years. Mwana mwina wang'ono amene sana alininza kaziwiri kapena imodzi ndi miezi ndiyo ofunika kugona ndi ndani ndi amayi ndi abambo. Koma wa 15 years agone limodzi ndi abambo ake sizogwira.
Government identified one surrounding village and a nearby hill to extend the camp, but that too appears not enough for the 50,000 inhabitants of the camp. Apart from the problem of inadequate space, water is another issue here.
Mavuro ni ambiri zedi, ifori marira bwera mawa, chama 7 koloko ndio kuti panema fika 6 koloko ujapa dakarani dakachapa kamba kuti anthu ndiwo chuluka kuti pese madzi apa timavurika kwambiri.
During our visit to the camp, we confirmed that the camp has registered 11 COVID-19 cases of children. These are first known cases in children. These children are aged between 5 and 16, and they are all at the camp's isolation center. Clinical officer in charge for the isolation unit, Henry Lally, says, however, none of the children have severe signs of the disease. The children were in a group of families that arrived at the camp following the government directive for all refugees living outside the camp to return to camp. Government says the order was on security grounds. A case on that matter is back in court later this week.
Lack of sound policy to regulate local construction industry is said to be one of the contributing factors fueling influx of uncertified personnel in the industry, which is deteriorating in standards. Speaking at the Research Agenda Validation Workshop in Lilongwe Wednesday, National Construction Industry Council NCIC Training and Research Director Nima Kadaluka acknowledges that the sector is struggling to improve in the absence of the policy document to enforce regulations governing the industry. Meanwhile, research done by the Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, Luana, has revealed that the local construction industry is flooded with uncertified graduates who are failing to make comprehensive decisions. Grace Combe reports.
A recent research which the National Construction Industry Council conducted through the engagement of a team of researchers from Rwanda revealed that poor workmanship in the construction industry is largely being fueled by influx of uncertified personnel in the industry. Engineer Patsani Kumambala says most of the uncertified personnel are from local universities and colleges who do not undergo professional trainings to be duly certified for the job because of missing sound policies to regulate the industry. He said this is a threat to the industry as it results into low-quality construction work, which is impacting on the growth of the sector and promoting depletion of natural resources. Engineer Kumambala says the study also revealed that the industry is using old technologies and standards, making it difficult on the international market.
Most of the graduates that are working out there without going through the proper channel. That is, you go, if you're an architect, you're supposed to qualify as an architect. So you work under a qualified architect for 2 years and qualify as a qualified architect. As similar as an engineer, you're supposed to work under a qualified engineer and qualify as a qualified engineer who is supposed to practice out there.
NCIC Training and Research Director Nema Kadaluka has acknowledged serious gaps in the regulation of the industry, which is costing the government and individuals huge sums of money. She said the council is therefore developing a guide for acceptable standards in all activities in the industry.
The research agenda is going to give us more information in terms of how we should regulate the industry. So the topics or the themes that have been mentioned in the research agenda are going to guide us to find more information in terms of regulating the industry so that we control the issues that are coming out as challenges in the industry.
Meanwhile, NCIC is soliciting views from stakeholders on the research priority areas. This is Grace Combe for Zodiac.
You're watching the news here on Zodiac. We'll be back with more after this. Welcome back. A reminder of the top stories. DPP legislators boycott deliberations in Parliament on Labour Relations Bill. Government passes it. Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 announces new measures against third wave of the pandemic effective Friday. Zodiac has exclusive access to footage showing poor living conditions for refugees at Zodiak camp. And in sports, Solom says will follow the newly introduced COVID-19 preventive measures at match venues to only 100 people. Now, moving on with the news, the Reserve Bank of Malawi has resorted to drag all employers who are yet to remit about 26.9 billion kwacha pension money arrears to fund managers to court in a move to compel them to do so. This has been disclosed by the bank through one of its senior officials, Paul Nyirenda, who spoke Wednesday in Lilongwe after the central bank issued Auction Holdings Limited and Amid Tracking 21-day ultimatums to settle their arrears or risk court action. According to the Pension Act of 2010, pension funds remittances are now mandatory and employers are mandated to enroll their employees on a pension scheme. The Malawi University of Science and Technology MAS has introduced a MAS endowment fund aimed at bailing out needy students from financial woes. MAS Director of Finance and Investments, McDonald Chapazika, says the idea follows observation that government alone cannot fully support the university financially for smooth operations. The fund will also benefit the university in research and staff development.
It is a pool of gifts that we will receive from sponsors, which will be invested as a pool, and we will be paying from that pool a portion of the interest that we generate for the utilization of activities that we agree with the donors. You know, in Malawi, we have a lot of needy students. A good portion of that resource will be used to support these students, their tuition fees as well as their upkeep. It will also be used for research and innovation. We believe as a university, it is time that we engage in research that benefits communities around us. Looking at the trend of funding in the last 5 years to public universities, we notice that government is under serious strain to meet all the needs of us as a university, along with the other public institutions. So what we are trying to do is to play our role as a corporate citizen to try and create other avenues that can give us extra resources. And we think the endowment is one such avenue.
Now, some Malawians have petitioned the British government requesting Britain to exempt Malawi from international English tests in academic and other international programs. The campaign is being led by media practitioner Roger Seula, and the petition is being signed up and circulated on social media. Seula has described the test as unfair and unreasonable, considering English is a central language in Malawi.
It is an unfair practice. It is unreasonable. Because Malawi, uses English as an official language, and we learn English from as early as nursery schools or primary schools. So we spend about 16 years as a minimum learning and mastering English, and all the medium of communication in Malawi is pretty much done in English. So one cannot get a primary school leaving certificate or a secondary school leaving certificate if they fail in English. So whether one gets distinctions in the rest of the subjects, but if they fail in English, it means it's non-negotiable. They don't qualify. And that is how much English is central in Malawi. So we need to appreciate that Malawi is a former British colony. It is also a member of the Commonwealth. And subjecting Malawians students to such kind of protocols, I think, is a big mockery to our education system, which upholds English as a central language from the word go. It is more disheartening to learn that these English proficiency exams are expensive. One has to pay about $200, and when they pass, their certificate expires after 2 years, and it means they have to sit again for that kind of examination. So I think the UK government can do better. They can review these things and make sure that Malawian students are exempted from the same.
Officials from the British High Commission have not been available to comment. Let's now move on to sports. Super League of Malawi says it will follow the newly introduced COVID-19 preventive measures set by government, which will, among others, restrict gatherings at match venues to only 100 people. Solon President Tia Somba Banda told us that once authorities gazette the measures this Friday, they will ensure the restrict adherence to the measures by increasing security. Minister of Health Kumbize Kandodo Chiponda, who is also co-chairperson of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, made the announcement on Wednesday in Lilongwe. Bright Kanyama has filed this report.
With the rising cases of COVID-19, government has moved in to contain the further spread of the disease by introducing new preventive measures. These measures, among others, has reduced the number of gatherings at match venues from 250 to 100 people and without spectators. Super League of Malawi President Tia Somba Banda told us that they will ensure there is strict adherence to the measures at match venues.
This will not be the first time. We have played the better part of the second round under restricted conditions, and we will apply the same conditions and the restrictions that were there. So it will not be much of a problem for us.
Meanwhile, sports analyst George Kaudamasina has asked the football authorities in the country to consider bailing out teams which are financially struggling, as the newly introduced measures might negatively affect them.
Most clubs have been depending on gate collections, and there are teams which have been complaining about finances, and this time around, likely they're going to take advantage to even withdraw from the Super League because they cannot even survive. Technically, our football is got dead.
Minister of Health Kumbizeka Chiponda, who is also co-chairperson of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, said the newly introduced measures will be effective starting Friday, 9 July 2021. For Zodiak, this is Bright Kanyama.
Meanwhile, the Ministry of Sports has made a special request to Treasury for 700 million kwacha to support Malawi's Flames ahead of Africa Cup of Nations finals and World Cup qualifiers. According to information made available to Zodiak, the request was made last week. And that's about what we had time for in this news edition, but before we go, a look at the headlines. Boycott deliberations in Parliament on Labour Relations Bill. Government passes it. Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 announces new measures against third wave of the pandemic effective Friday. Zodiak has exclusive access to footage showing poor living conditions for refugees at Zaleka camp. And in sports, Solom says will follow the newly introduced COVID-19 preventive measures at match venues to only 100 people. Visit our website zodiacmalawi.com for more news. My name is Chancellor Zabanda. Thanks for watching.